So welcome back, everybody. It's time once again for another episode of Health Talks with Dr. Trinh. The one show, the only show that shows you the path to a healthier life, one conversation at a time. And today, well, we got a mouthful. I may fumble a bit over some of the words here, but I think you'll get the idea pretty quickly here. Let's bring in our guest. I'm going to let her say her name so I don't butcher it badly here, but welcome to the show here.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm Dr. Swathi Varanasi, but I go by Dr. Swathi for short, if that's easier.
Okay, Dr. Swathi, I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
where are you a doctor? What are you a doctor of? Let's give us some background on who you are, and then I'll set up what we're going to talk about here today.
Sure, yes. So I'm an integrative pharmacist. So growing up, I was using Ayurvedic lifestyle methodologies. I was still Ayurveda also, I guess, for a background is really an ancient healing methodology of medicine, the oldest actually in the world.
Based in India, right? It's the
yes,
Indian.
from India, exactly,
Indian
from
medicine.
Southeast Asia.
Right.
And so I grew up, around these Ayurvedic lifestyle principles, and we use those in the house just as often as we used over-the-counter and prescription options. So to me, healing, health, and wellness has always been this very multifactorial, patient-centric experience. And so, going into healthcare, going into pharmacy school, I was looking for kind of that, well-rounded, comprehensive educational experience. And it really was only focused on kind of the prescription side. But I really was raised with the idea that there was value in all these different modalities. Of course, at the time, I didn't know it was called integrative medicine, but it's really the way that I've grown to appreciate all of these different possibilities and, maybe alternatives for patients.
Right.
And so that's a little bit of, the way that I view health, healing, wellness, and medicine. And I really think at the end of the day, it's how we can, as healthcare providers, help patients along their journey. And so if, a patient comes to me and says, I'm having issues with sleep, I would love to talk with them about everything from what prescriptions they're on to what supplements could be a good option, all the way to sleep hygiene and nutrition and movement and everything else that really encapsulates the human experience. It's really not just about one modality or the other.
All right, a lot to unpack there. Let's see if we can look at some of it. First of all, as the famous movie Jerry Maguire and Tom Cruise and all that said, you had me at hello. When you started saying, I believe in more than one approach to medicine, I think that's where a lot of Americans are today. We, no slam against Western medicine. It certainly extended lives. It certainly got some amazing technologies, amazing therapies, amazing breakthroughs. But I, like most aging baby boomers, aren't sure if I just want a pill or a procedure. And that seems to be mostly what they're peddling. Maybe that's a harsh statement, but we've talked about it a great deal on this show here, which is if I go to a traditional Western doctor, they've only got a few minutes to see me. It's kind of an assembly line. What's your symptom? What's your problem? I can't really look at the whole picture here. I can't spend a lot of time diving into your background and understanding your diet and your exercise and everything else. You've got this problem, especially if I go to a specialist. Okay, your knee hurts, your back hurts, your heart has got a problem. I'm generally going to give you a pill to try and counteract that. It may not cure it, but it'll counteract that cholesterol or whatever buildup or something. Or if it's severe enough, I'm going to give you a procedure. And that's where they really excel. I mean, if you really want to replace your heart, by God, we can do it. But short of that, they seem to be a little short on answers. My back hurts. I can't sleep. I've got these mysterious, ongoing chronic conditions. And everybody kind of shrugs and goes, get over it. You're getting old. What are you going to do? So I've always felt, and I know my wife feels that way, and I know most of my friends feel that way, that we're willing to look at maybe diet is a factor. Maybe exercise is a factor. Maybe I'll look at Indian Ayurvedic cures and herbs and stuff here. Maybe I'll look at Chinese traditional medicine. Maybe I'll look at vitamins. And everybody's got their own kind of thing they're experimenting with. And I don't know, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because I'm playing doctor, but I'm only playing doctor because I don't think I'm getting enough choices. So
So
talk.
I do think that overall it's a great thing because I think at the end of the day, as you mentioned, it's very person specific. And so
Right.
I think if someone really resonates with the idea of taking, a supplement over a prescription, or maybe there's someone else that is taking 3 prescription agents every day and they're not having any side effects or issues, but they're looking to see what else they can do in their daily life to optimize,
Right.
stress or wellness practices or sleep or, other things you mentioned. I think that what you're saying is right, and that it really comes down to the patient, and we have to figure out how each patient can fulfill, their treatment goals. And so it's really at the end of the day, I would hope people are not, coming in with this idea that, I'm going to go to the doctor and they're going to tell me what's right. But I want it
Right.
to be more of an open dialogue and understanding of, and having that buy-in from the patient too is just so important, because if you tell them, oh, go take this supplement, or go add this prescription to your regimen, you also have to take into account the patient's life experience and their lifestyle, and
Right.
what's really going to work for them.
So on the one hand, we're all Americans, and Americans, my favorite rant is we all want a 60-second solution. We want an instant answer. I want a pill to just make it go away. I don't want to go exercise. I don't want to eat better. Just wipe out the cholesterol. Get rid of it. I don't want to worry about why I'm feeling the onset of Alzheimer's, as Dr. Trinh will talk about. I don't want to fight that or combat that. I do, but I don't want to put the effort in it. Can't you just give me a pill? Can't we just wipe out all the bad things I've done in 30 seconds here? And that seems to be a different mentality than when I've gone to. I've full disclosure, I've gone to some Chinese. I've never explored Indian Ayurvedic, but I've explored Chinese, acupuncture, acupressure, things like that. My wife goes to Mother's all the time, and Whole Earth, all these places built with shelves of herbal supplements and other homeopathic and all these other non-traditional approaches to medicine. We've tried a bunch of this stuff here. And I wonder again, are we doing more harm than good, or are we just kidding ourselves? Because on the one hand, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, and I'm relying on some kid in the counter to tell me this is the one that gives you better sleep. This is the one that's going to get rid of that anxiety. And what do they know? So talk about some of that. We have an urge. What you're selling is appealing. The idea of multiple approaches. At the same time, I'm an American and I want a quick 60-second answer. So how do I balance those two urges here?
Yeah, I mean that's the golden question. And so I think that, to me, the way that I view it and the way that I try to educate consumers and educate other providers is talking about the importance of, evidence-based education.
Right.
And there's just such a need for it in the space right now. And it's honestly one of the things that gets me the most fired up and excited to be in this space, is really that there's such a need, because consumers are asking the questions, patients are asking the questions, they want these answers, but they just don't know where to turn. They don't know what website is, reliable. And
Right.
there's not enough kind of integrative practitioners that have gone past the barrier to be able to be like, this is what you need to know and this is what's going to help you. So I do think that it does require a little bit of patience,
Right.
because, a lot of these, methodologies, it's not something where you take it once. It might be, I mean, you might take it once and you might feel better, which is great. But the real long-term benefits and effects is, you can look at it just the same as you would for exercise or diet. It is just something that is going to be something that we have to work towards every single day. And even though there are some supplements, there are some options that, you can feel instantly great, we're not getting to the root cause. So
Right.
I think that, this idea of going the more natural route, yes, you can still get something that's instantaneous, but we still need to look at the root cause. So maybe some natural options also are maybe not getting to the root cause either. And so it's really about how I can be better at articulating that to
Right.
a provider or a consumer or a patient, and having the platforms much like this to be able to do that.
So once I enter the medical system, I'm no longer called Paul. I'm no longer called an individual. I'm called a patient. And I'm anything but patient once I enter the medical system. I want answers now. And you're all saying, well, take some time, lose some weight, exercise, meditate, try some herbs, do this. Or, wow, that's a hard sell because you're asking me to change a routine that's very comfortable. For years, I grew up in the Midwest. All we ate is meat and potatoes. That's my diet. It took me a long time to get out of that. I still want to drift back into that thing. I don't need those vegetables. I don't need all this other stuff here. And yet, I'm terrified. Here's the motivator. I'm terrified as I look at my late parents and what they went through, their blind trust of doctors. Okay, I'll take anything. And they took everything. And by the end, my mother was so drugged up with 12, 15 different things, and I don't know who was checking. I don't even know if they knew how these all interact with each other. But she was a zombie. And my dad would dole out the pills. Well, and sometimes every so often, a pharmacist would say, "Why are you taking all these pills?" And who prescribed this? And we found out that in some cases the doctor had died. She'd been taking them so many years, they didn't even know. But the doctors, when they prescribe them, they may look at what you've got, but they're not real well versed or real interested, in my opinion, as to the interaction of all these pills. So let's talk about this forgotten player in the system, you, the pharmacist. Honest to God, I hope you don't take offense at this, but I don't see the pharmacist or talk to my pharmacist at all. I see the pharmacist as just a pill deliverer. They check, they double check, they package it. They got to know what they're doing, the blue pill and the red pill and everything, and they'll explain to you. If you ask them, they'll answer questions. But pretty much you hand them a piece of paper and they hand you a package of pills back. That's the extent of my relationship with my pharmacist. There is none.
And it shouldn't be like that. And that's just the way that, retail pharmacy is what it's called. So it's all these chain pharmacies. It's really the way that they've kind of manufactured this process and almost taken the human component or the, human pharmacist component out of that entire interaction. If we look back to, the way that pharmacies used to be in like the 80s, 90s, even early 2000s, honestly, it was, you went to your neighborhood pharmacy and you had this rapport and this relationship and this trust. I mean, pharmacists used to be, I like to think that they still are, the most accessible healthcare professional out there because, you might have one on every street corner in a city, for example. So I do think that it is worth mentioning, we do go through very rigorous 4-year doctorate level training all about these medications. And, a lot of the time when we're actually behind the counter, I mean, I haven't been doing that for quite a few years, but, when I used to do that, some of the prescriptions that you get from the healthcare provider, and also to give context, providers have generally 1 semester of their entire training on drugs, but they are the ones that have, the opportunity to write prescriptions, which to me seems quite a bit, like maybe off center.
And would my let's say I had a relationship. I can't tell you the name. I don't know what they look like. I've almost never asked them a question. They're behind glass. I pull up in my car, I stand at the counter line, I hand them the piece of paper, and they go pull all this stuff and hand it back. And they always politely say, "Do you have any questions?" And I say no, and I leave. I don't see anybody talking to the pharmacist. I don't hear it. It's just simply a transaction. So,
and it really shouldn't be like that because we are trained to be able to answer these questions. And then the other thing too that I did want to mention is that sometimes you get these, prescription requests from the providers, and we actually have to spend time behind the scenes that the patient doesn't see, that we actually have to call the provider and say, "This is the wrong drug. Oh, did you take a look at their other medications?" Especially when it's in a healthcare system and not necessarily just in a retail setting. Or maybe we can see the other medications that they're going to pick up. We have a better, idea of what the regimen looks like. And so we can say things, and I made many a call in the past to providers saying, they're already on a medication that is, has the same mechanism of action or the same intention or same indication is kind of the fancy term for it. Or, maybe they're recommending this medication that actually interacts with something in their profile and maybe the provider doesn't know that. So that's that's really the behind the scenes kind of stuff that the pharmacist is
So
doing.
let me raise my hand. I'm going to challenge you one time on this. I don't doubt that you've done it, but I've never seen anybody in the CVS's of the world, the Walgreens, I'm not picking any one particular chain, but it's a machine back there. They're cranking this stuff out. Come back in 10 minutes and they're counting them out and there's 10 other people waiting. I can't imagine, I've certainly never observed it, where they say, wait a minute, we better call you doctor here. Do you know that Paul's taking this? Is this really what you want to give him here? There's something better. That was what this is the fail safe that was supposedly built into the system so that the doctor doesn't overprescribe, wrongly prescribe, not pay attention to something here in their rush. And I didn't realize they have that much limited knowledge about drugs. The pharmacist is supposed to be the what would you call it? The protector here, the backup, the fail safe or something here.
Yeah.
How often do they do that in these retail chains, and how often do they just go, well?
So honestly, they're supposed to do it all the time. But it's really dependent on if they're looking at the medication list, they're looking at everything else the patient is taking, again, only from the prescription side. They're not looking at the supplement list that's not built into the system. It's not built into the computers, because there's actually a lot of potential interactions with supplements, with herbal options.
We're going to get to that next.
Because that's something that is very oftentimes, even in the pharmacy curriculum, to be completely transparent, that's not something that's discussed in detail. That's something that I had to pursue further training after I finished my pharmacy degree, because in pharmacy school, we are we are the drug experts. We know all things about all the drugs out there, all the new ones coming out, everything that you need to know about a drug, a pharmacist definitely knows. But the issue is it's still a system that is cranking out these pharmacists that are prescription drug experts. So when I say drug expert, I mean prescription drug expert, because we're not actually getting a lot of the in-depth information we need about supplements, which I feel like is a real disservice to the patient when the patient is coming over and asking, hey, should I take, B12 with metformin? I mean, absolutely you should, but, unless there is, a pharmacist there that knows that kind of information, it's something that gets kind of lost in translation.
So you've perfectly segued us into the next thing. So I'm just going to end by reiterating my skepticism. Part of it's my fault. I don't interact with these people. Part of it's their fault, because there's just it feels like just a pickup place. I'm just there to pick up medication.
And it's honestly because of the way the system is set up and the pressure that's put on the pharmacist to execute certain number of prescriptions in a certain number of hours. At this point, they're kind of just a product of the system, which is so unfortunate, because it's really not the way it all started, and really not the way that pharmacists want to practice. They're just kind of to be pressured to meet these KPIs and keep their jobs. And then they're being pressured, by the chain pharmacies, for example, saying, we can bring in a pharmacist for a third of your salary now. Like, the starting salaries for pharmacists now are unbelievably low, record time low, because they know they can just kick out someone with 20 years of experience and grab someone who's brand new and pay them not a third, that's a little dramatic, but half, or 2/3 of what they should be getting paid.
So again, we've got a systematic problem here, and we both have to own part of it. I never see them as a resource or try and take advantage of them. They're there. I've never had one say no. I've never had one make me feel dumb for asking a question or cut me off because they're too busy. But I never ask, and they offer politely, but it's clear there's 10 people behind me and they got 10 more prescriptions and they're trying to crank them out as quickly as they can. So I question, I don't know if anybody's ever surveyed this, but I question how often they stop and really do their core function, which is, should you be taking this? Let me call. Let me ask them. I don't know how you'd get the doctor on the phone. They're so busy. I don't know how you'd get, and then you'd have to say, well, come back.
Sometimes you have to leave a message, and then you're speaking with the administrator there, and it's a whole chase game. Yeah.
Right. So I don't even know how this, and then I'd be mad. I want my pill, and I don't want to wait for the doctor. He gave it to me. She gave it to me. So I think I get the concept. I think the practice doesn't play that well. And
Mhm.
I think somebody should examine this carefully. So then there are independent pharmacists. Are you an independent pharmacist, or you're not a pharmacist anymore at all? You
So I still do function as a pharmacist. Just 1 second. Are we recording?
Yes.
Oh, we are. Okay, just double check because I didn't see the recording
Oh,
symbol.
I'm not
Okay.
recording on Zoom. No, I'm
Oh,
recording
you
this through
record elsewhere. Okay, sorry
separate
about that.
software.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I actually don't function as a kind of conventional pharmacist anymore. But I do use my pharmacy knowledge every day when working with patients and customers though.
So what do you do? What's your
So what do I
day-to-day
do?
job?
Yes. So, as I was going through my training, I started seeing these voids in the market of where we need to have more education, where we need to have, better guidance for healthcare professionals. And as someone who identifies, as an integrative health pharmacist, I am someone who's very passionate about figuring out what's the right choice for the patient.
Right.
And to me, it really comes down to their patient goals, their treatment, whatever they're looking to achieve. And so,
Right.
while
All
I
that
was
sounds
working,
good. I'm still struggling to see, what do you do in this process? Now, what
yes,
role do you play?
definitely. And so, going through and being an integrative pharmacist, I started off in the pharmacy setting, in the quintessential independent pharmacy setting, as well as the clinic setting. And I was able to do what's called comprehensive MTM, or medication therapy management. So it's kind of, a term that I made up, honestly,
Okay.
because it's
I
normal
love that.
MTM. Normal MTM is really about, what is a patient taking, and looking at a medication reconciliation from the standpoint of only prescriptions.
Right.
But I kind of expanded upon that, and now I'm asking about their prescriptions, I'm asking about their lifestyle, I'm asking about their supplements, their herbal regimen, and everything that encapsulates, kind of their regular use, which I quantify as like 5 times or more a week.
So
And
how
so
do I
that's I kind of
how do
Mhm.
I find you, though? Who pays you? Do you work for the pharmacy? Do you work independently for patients? Do you work for clinics? Do you just teach others how to do this? What is it? Where do you earn? Where do you fit in, and how do I find you?
Yes, definitely. So started off, as I mentioned, in the pharmacy, in the clinic setting, but since then, I went on to, educate others about this through academia. So whether it was, teaching the pharmacology and all of that background to traditional Chinese medicine schools, or teaching at colleges of pharmacy, and teaching kind of this more alternative side and this integrative side. So doing a bit more of the education. I do see patients as well through telemedicine. So that's something that I really enjoy. And also, seeing the voids in the market is really important to figure out where I can fit. And so one of the voids that I saw was just an overall lack of evidence-based information and education in the cannabinoid space.
Okay.
And so that's quite a bit of what I do now is, in the cannabinoid space, how I can educate. And I did co-found a brand called Element Apothic, and we have products and educational services. And so I'm in charge of all things product formulation. And then equally just as important is the education. So talking at conferences, creating online courses, figuring out engaging ways to interact with the customer, I think is really important right now, especially in the age of conscious consumerism, and the importance of what people are spending their money on, and the fact that health is just such of utmost importance right now, which I love to see. So that's a bit of what I do in the cannabinoid space specifically. And then apart from that, I also serve as a principal investigator for a CRO, and this CRO is very much focused on how we can help supplement brands, medical device brands, biotech brands, all figure out how they can provide evidence-based information and evidence-based marketing claims for their products.
And what's a CRO? I don't know what it is.
Consumers.
What's a
Oh,
CRO?
sorry. A CRO is a contract research organization.
Okay.
So a CRO is pretty much, biotech companies, wellness companies. If they're looking to do a clinical trial, they outsource to a company that's called a CRO, and all the clinical trials are executed through this vendor company.
Okay, now that's a whole nother area that I find fascinating, because as I've explored traditional Chinese medicine, like acupressure and acupuncture and stuff, I've tried. I have a guy I go see for some of this stuff, or other alternatives. Maybe they're not that far-fetched. Chiropractic, that used to be seen as far-fetched, or osteopaths. I mean, they've been sort of accepted more into the mainstream. Or all this herbal stuff that my wife's always bringing home from mothers and markets and places like that. And I say, well, who told you this? Well, the kid in the aisle said this is the one to
Oh
take. And,
no.
and I'm like, well, and the package makes all sorts of claims. This will, within the boundaries of the FDA, this suggests that it will help me sleep. It'll get rid of my anxiety and all these other mysterious chronic conditions that doctors say, I can give you a pill, but I got no solution for that. Usually pain, anxiety, depression, other sorts of things. There's just a variety of general ailments, anxiety related, stress related, weight related things that we're all struggling with as we get older here. So here's my point. All that stuff, Chinese, this, that, herbs and everything, there's no evidence for any of this stuff here. If there is, I can't find any of it. There's studies all the time about things. You can kind of find it, but maybe it suggests this, maybe it does this. There isn't a lot of studies of interaction of any of this stuff. More and more, though, hospitals, if you go in for surgery, are going to say, are you taking anything else we should know about cannabinoids and herbs and some other things here? Because for years, the argument was still on when people come on like yourself and say, it's natural. It can't hurt you. Cannabis, you can't die from cannabis.
That is not a true statement at all.
Yeah.
And that's something I fully do not support. I think that just because it's natural doesn't mean it's safe. And that's a big thing. I mean, you know how many poisons are natural? Like arsenic, that's natural, but that doesn't mean it's safe. So, I mean, we really have to think about, and going back to, before procedures and all of that, that is. And at the end of the day, if you ask your healthcare provider, should I take this supplement? Should I take this cannabinoid CBD product? They're going to respond the same way that I was taught to respond in pharmacy school, which is always optimizing the benefit versus risk ratio. So if you're thinking about the patient and you're thinking about, okay, they're asking a question about this supplement,
right?
As someone who is conventionally trained, Western trained, I'm thinking about the benefit versus risk. And if I personally don't know the benefit, then I only see risk, then I'm going to say no, right? I mean, I say I is kind of the general I, but I know the benefit because I'm an integrative pharmacist, but the average conventional practitioner actually doesn't know the benefit because they're not being educated on it. And so I think that that's really important to take into account is if someone is going to their healthcare provider, their internist, maybe a specialist, and they're asking about these certain supplements, it's highly possible that their provider actually doesn't know anything about it. And so if you ask them, they're just going to say, don't take it because they're just thinking about that ratio. So I think that's something good to keep in context because they're not against it. They just honestly don't know about it. So it doesn't make them a bad person. They just don't know.
I'll go one step further. And again, this is just, as my late father used to say, the answer is money. Now, what was the question? Money seems to be the driver of all these things. It's not just, and I'm not just saying greed or they want to make money. It's the fear of losing money through litigation, through somebody suing you because you told me it was okay and it turns out to be, and I don't know. So I think, in addition to saying no, the next most popular answer is I don't know, which immediately makes me go, I don't know. He doesn't know. I don't know. So either you say the heck with it and you roll the dice and you take it, or it has a chilling effect simply because they don't know and they kind of give you that look like, I don't know if I'd be doing that.
Most healthcare providers want and they have this kind of complex where they don't want to seem like they're the ones that don't know. And so I think that they would just rather come off as, and just say no, just seeming like they actually do know, which is incredibly misleading. But from their perspective, they're not being misleading because they actually don't know. And then the other thing I did want to mention is that you mentioned, are there studies? If so, what studies are there, on supplements or on, certain active ingredients? And there actually are a lot of studies out there. If you look on clinicaltrials.gov, if you look on PubMed, there actually are quite a few. It's just if you contrast the quantity and sometimes the quality of those studies with, what is done on prescription agents, then, there is a contrast there. So there are studies and there are studies done in humans, but we also need to understand as, whether we're healthcare professionals or otherwise, what is the quality of the study? Are these studies done in humans? Is it randomized, placebo controlled? How are we actually
Are they
viewing
good studies or bad studies? Are they real studies? Are they big enough samples or just anecdotal evidence here? Right. All
And
right.
then we
So
also need to think about too that a lot of, like, for example, traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, a lot of these studies exist, or even homeopathy, they all exist, but they're in different languages. And so I
yeah,
think there's also this disconnect that, we need some sort of, we need experts in the clinical research field that are also willing to, whether they do replication studies or they actually just translate the studies that have already been done into English. And, in the past, few decades, there has been more of a push across all of these different, methodologies of medicine to incorporate and publish in English, because that's kind of the kind of universal language in
right.
science. But,
Right.
looking back farther than that, a lot of the previous research that does in fact exist is not in English. So it's not easily searchable. And,
Interesting.
there's all the other barriers from that perspective.
So I'll give you again. This is just my own experience. So I go see a guy who says he's a Chinese traditional doctor. He's gone through their schools from China,
Yes.
other place, but he's not recognized as a doctor here. He's really just recognized as a massage therapist because he does acupressure. That's his key thing that he does. He doesn't do acupuncture. He does acupressure, doing these pressure points in your body under the belief that the body has a chi, has an energy system, and there's a map of it, and it's been established for 1,000 years in Chinese traditional healing, and it's probably similar in, I don't know that much about Ayurvedic Indian traditional practices, but in other things, in Japanese Reiki and other sorts of things, they all have a similar idea. There's some sort of energy in your body. Nobody can quite identify what it is, but it's been mapped for 1,000 years. And if I release these pressure points and release the blockage, then theoretically the body has energy to heal or help itself. So in addition to feeling good, because he finds these painful points in your body, and you say, that can't be good. Ooh, I didn't know it hurt under there. His idea is to massage it. Maybe he's just massaging the muscles. Maybe he's just opening up the blood vessels. Maybe he's just relaxing something. Maybe that's all I'm getting out of this. But his theory is that somehow it does release energy flowing through your body. So I've asked him many times, where's the study? Where's the stuff? And he goes like, we don't bother with that. We've been doing this for 1,000 years. We believe it. There are people subscribe to this, and we're not that interested in trying to prove it to the rest of the Western world here. And I wonder if that's part of the problem. There's just no interest in Indian Ayurvedic traditional healers saying, this is the way we've always done it. You either want to buy this program or not. I'm not interested in proving it under Western standards.
I think it depends on where they were trained and who their clientele is, because I feel like if you're living in the Western world now and you're just surrounded by this constant discussion of like, is this evidence-based? Where
Right.
is the research? Then I do think that there is overall like quite a push towards, how can we do studies on this? What do these studies look like? How can we ensure that they're clinically rigorous and all of those questions? But I think that if they were trained, back where they are from, and, then they have their clientele that is also, they've already been
Ethnic,
raised with
right.
this, they believe in it, then I think from that perspective, then like in his mind or in their mind, perhaps that they don't need the studies to continue their business in the way that they're doing it. So I think
Right.
it's really just the context there of, like who their clientele is. And if they don't see it as like a value proposition, then they don't feel like they need it.
But part of the value proposition would be money again, because if more of these practices were approved by the FDA, if there was some studies to look at this, then you open the door to hospitals and other sorts of things where or insurance, where insurance would pay for Indian Ayurvedic practices or would pay for Chinese herbal medicine or now some of them have cracked the door. You can get
Yeah.
reimbursements for massage a little bit. You can get some reimbursement for acupuncture. That seems to have pierced the veil somehow for pain treatment.
Mm-hmm.
A few of these have made some inroads, and I can actually, there's a category now under Medicare or under insurance claims where I can get reimbursed for some of this, but seems to be a tiny crack in the thing. If I went to an Indian Ayurvedic, I don't even know where I'd find one, but if I went to a traditional Indian Ayurvedic, and is it based on the same idea of an energy grid in my system here, or is it a different
Not quite. No, it's a little bit different, but it's really all based on lifestyle principles. So it's about how food is medicine and how food can. There is an energy component to it, but not quite as strong as in traditional Chinese medicine. It really is about how can we nourish our bodies and do it in a way that is in alignment with the way the body is already working. So it's not working against the body; it's working with the body. A great example is, drinking ice cold water is such a shock to the body.
Everybody
because our
always says that.
body is 98 point, something degrees, right? And so if we're shocking the body with water, then that's, not a great way for our body to then, actually get the nutrients and the hydration that we need from it. So,
And isn't that, but isn't that what all Americans, me included, I want ice cold water.
I don't.
I want
That's me.
ice cold beer. I had a bar for a while. Oh, we had to have the coldest beer on tap. It had to come out almost like ice slush. We wanted ice cold products here. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's not the best for your digestion, and it's
I
not the
don't
way
doubt
you're
it.
going
I'm
to
just
get
saying
the most.
that's what Americans are asking.
Beer's not a good example, but it's not the way you're going to get the most, optimized nutrients out of your food either. So
Right.
there's definitely a lot of principles like that are like, how do we work with the body as opposed to against the body? And then how does the body kind of harmonize with its environment is another thing
So
too.
in Ayurvedic approaches, and maybe I'm saying it wrong. You say it's slightly different. Is it, how do you, is it, I always know it was
Ayurveda is the practice. Ayurveda.
Ayurveda. Okay. So in Ayurveda or Ayurvedic, would that be a correct way to say it?
Ayurvedic, yeah. Mm-hmm.
If I was following this traditional practice, it came from India, which is another whole. I've always heard there's like three or four. There's Western medicine. Then there's traditional Chinese medicine. Then there's Ayurveda, and then there's a few other substrata that were like homeopathic things and stuff. You got to impose.
Yeah, and that's completely different as well.
Completely different. So there's a handful of these things, and if you go to the aisles, you can find segments for these things, and most of them have some sort of herbal supplement.
A lot of them do, yeah.
Where they're giving you something to help heal your body. Chinese seem to have more because there's this energy release, so they're trying to find ways to manipulate the energy through sticking pins in pressure points or massaging pressure points or something.
And Ayurveda, it's a bit more of how do you incorporate, what maybe, let's say, Western culture would take as a supplement, but in Ayurveda, it's how do you actually incorporate it into your daily routine and into the food you're already eating. So instead of taking a turmeric supplement, it's thinking about how can we incorporate turmeric and activate it in the way that we're preparing it in food so that we actually get more nutrient and, bioavailability out of it.
It's not just popping a turmeric pill. It's not just
which you can, but you have to take quite a high dose to get the same type of, like bang for your buck, if you will, versus, preparing it in certain ways and then incorporating it into your diet on the regular versus taking a supplement.
Well, you certainly, if Dr. Trinh was here, he would say, you had me at hello. His whole idea is food is medicine.
Yes.
Food is the first medicine that you take. And if you're taking poisonous food, you're poisoning your body. And poison food is prevalent in Western diets. Salt, sugar, processed crap, all the stuff we consume that everybody knows probably isn't good for you, but we've been brought up on it. We like it. We crave it. It's quick. It's easy. It's packaged pretty. It's all that stuff that sells us this stuff here. And if we learned how to cook and eat, if we changed our diet even to a Mediterranean diet, more oils and fish and beans and other sorts of leafy vegetables, other sorts of things, we would see, the argument goes, dramatic results, drops certainly in cholesterol and obesity and other sorts of diabetes and all these other things that.
Yeah, there's really good research out there about the blue zones. I don't know if you've heard of the blue zones.
Kind of, but where people are living and eating differently, I guess, right?
Having the highest number of centenarians. And it's not only, so centenarians is the number of people that are over 100.
Right.
But it's not only that having the quantifiable number, but also the quality of life that they're having is just incredible. And like the research out there about, what the people in the blue zones are doing, they're eating locally. They're eating whole foods. They're not really, privy to a lot of the outside kind of Western influence, if you will, of a
Right.
lot of this processed, quick, easy food. And it's also so much about what I find fascinating about the blue zones is it's also about community, and it's about finding like their sense of purpose. Each one of the cultures, that they've explored, they all have their like sense of purpose, or even like their, belief in, like whether it's a higher being in terms of God or if it's spiritual. And there's so many other elements at
And a
play.
communal connection, I assume, where they're
Yes.
not such individuals. I mean, America is,
Yeah.
I can, like everybody else, sing the praise of America all day long. But at the same time, I wonder, we're so individual obsessed these days. That pendulum has swung so far. It started in the left when the old hippies like me said, I'm not going to listen to the man. I'm going to grow my hair. I'm not going to do what my dad did. I'm going to live life my way. You can't. If it feels good, I'll try it and I'll do it. And now that seems to have permeated society in general. And now you've got on the right wing examples of, I'm not wearing a mask. I'm not trying that. I'm not believing that. I'm not taking a vaccine. I'm not doing any of this stuff anymore. There's this, both sides are using it to justify, I'm going to do exactly what I want. And on the surface, that sounds very appealing. But then it leaves us, well, how am I doing anything for the greater good? Am I doing anything to help the community? Do I have an obligation to anybody but myself? I don't know. I wonder somehow if we haven't swung too far.
I would argue that we have, and I think research would support that we have swung a little too far on the independent side. Yes.
Yeah, because I always said, I sometimes describe myself as a left-leaning libertarian, and people say, well, that can't be. And I said, well, yeah, there are people like that, because it basically means, and I'm a good Irish Catholic, so I have this overtone of, yes, but. Yes, I want to do all these things, and yes, you can't tell me to do, but I have to care and look out for others. I have to be concerned about my community and my family and everything else. So I have to balance this independence with some sort of obligation to the community. And maybe that means I got to pay my taxes. Maybe that means I got to serve in the military. Maybe it means I got to wear a mask. Maybe it means I got to do something I don't want to do for the greater good.
It could be also as simple as just looking out for your neighbor. And I feel like there's so many times that we move to a new neighborhood and we don't even know who our neighbors are. So sometimes it's very simple things too.
Yeah. So I think I sometimes wonder if that isn't the root cause. It's the root of what makes America as powerful and successful. We all come here and we can do exactly what we want to do within certain limitations. I can't yell fire in a crowded theater. They've set certain boundaries to these things. I can own a gun, but I can't own a machine gun. There are certain boundaries to my freedom. I chafe at those. I want no boundaries, no chains. I don't want the man telling me what to do. I can do whatever I want to do. But at the same time, we've lost some of that communal connection, which I suspect in these blue zones, you look out for one another. You think, partly because they have to. I remember, I'll give you a crazy example, but I went to Mexico and my battery blew up. And I started my car and the battery exploded. I don't know why. I just put a battery in, but it did. Now I'm in Mexico. I'm in like Ensenada or something, not that far south of the border. And I said, well, let's call AAA. No AAA. Well, let's call the car dealer. No car dealer. How do you get a battery fixed? Well, my brother knows somebody who might bring somebody. It was this community, people I don't even know rallied around me. It took a while. And finally, somebody showed up with a battery and put it in. And I said, well, here, no, senor, I'm helping my cousin, my brother. You do the same for somebody else. And I thought, wow, there's a different way of living. But partly,
it's one of the things too that I hear people say that are American, like when they travel abroad, they're always almost taken aback by, the amount of friendliness and the amount of,
help.
Just like the willingness to help someone who, they've never met before. And I think that's just,
I'll drive you there. I'll take you there. I'll show you.
It really is a standard in the way that so many other communities practice. And perhaps that's, maybe why they're healthier and maybe why they're, more emotionally happy as well.
Yeah, right. But how can they be happy? They don't have big screen TVs. They don't have, instant ice pops. They don't have ice cold beer. They don't have, these things.
But a lot of what you're saying, is about this like instantaneous, like instant
Yeah.
gratification, if you will.
Yes.
And, so much of what we're so comfortable, like this idea of comfort and this idea of ease, like the growth of us as human beings, the growth of us as a society really is only going to come from a little bit or maybe a lot in this case of discomfort. And that's where like so much of the greatness in life is from, is when we push ourselves just a little bit to see what we can achieve. So maybe that's the reframe that we need as Americans.
I'm with you. Again, you got me at hello here, because I think too often we want to avoid the pain at all costs. We want to avoid anything that's uncomfortable. And it's only by pushing through sometimes, no pain, no gain. Sometimes athletes say that all the time. But sometimes you got to push through some of those things to see what's on the other side, or to learn something about yourself, or to grow. I grew up as a storyteller and studied screenwriting, all this stuff for years. And one of the things they teach in a basic story is you have to have conflict for it to be a story.
Mm-hmm.
I can't just say I woke up, we talked, and then I went to bed tonight. No story there. The story
it's also not necessarily anything people want to watch from a movie or TV perspective.
Got to be some kind of struggle. I got to get there before the bomb goes off. I got to find the girl again. I got to do this before something.
Right.
There's some struggle, and out of the struggle, because they said without struggle there is no change, and without change there's no story. If you start and end in the same place, I woke up, I came back to the same place. Who cares? Big deal. It's the learning of. It's the Greek mythology. And the moral of the story, boys and girls, is don't do this. Don't try and have wax wings and fly to the sun like Icarus. You're going to fall apart. There's a moral to the story in most stories. And therefore, it requires some sort of struggle and some sort of change. But struggle is not, we avoid, we embrace it as entrepreneurs, but we really reject it as individual Americans. No, I want comfort. I want quick. I want instant. I don't want any pain, any negativity, any noise. I want it all simple, easy. We're like little kids, I think. So anyway, well, a lot of this is fascinating on multiple levels here. Where do you think cannabinoids? I know that was what we're supposed to be talking about here. Cannabimetics or some crazy thing here.
Cannabimimetics.
Where things that mimic or work with the cannabinoid system. I know that was the fundamental issue I was supposed to be addressing here, and we got way off the beaten path here. Let's spend a few minutes and cover that. What are you talking about? Are we talking about things that mimic compounds or chemicals or something that you found that mimics the potential benefits of cannabinoids? Or are we talking about just in general how things work with this other mysterious endocannabanoid system that we still know so little about and only so recently discovered here?
Yeah, so it's kind of a combination. So cannabimimetics really is this fancy term for, whether it's substances, activities, foods, spices, things we can incorporate very simply into our daily regimen,
right,
or maybe things we're already doing that actually can optimize or modulate the endocannabinoid system.
Right.
And so, as you may or may not know as a listener, everyone has an endocannabinoid system, and these, endocannabinoids,
which they didn't know that long ago. Is that still an accepted?
It's only a few decades ago did we discover this.
And if I went to, I'm just going to interrupt you. If I went to med school or went to pharmacy school, would they tell me there's an endocannabinoid system, or would they still ignore that?
Oh, the curriculums that are set in place in, the medicine pharmacy worlds are still very, very stagnant's a dreadful term, but it's very, very much set in the old fashioned ways, and they haven't very much been updated. There are sometimes, elective courses, one-off, discussions and lectures, maybe a guest speaker will come in, but at the end of the day, it's really not a part of the core curriculum yet. And that's something I'm actively trying to change. And, when we're thinking about the endocannabinoid system, one of the things that I like to talk about is cannabimimetics, because at the end of the day, really, I think a lot of people are still weary of cannabinoids. They're not really sure if it's the right choice for them. They're not really sure, the history, the background, the potential uses, the
And the
research.
amount to take, and how to and
Exactly.
how to take
And
it. Do
so
I smoke it? Do I put it under my tongue? Do I absorb it through my skin? All the
exactly. And
Yeah,
so one of the ways to start thinking about how to modulate or optimize your endocannabinoid system, even before the inclusion of cannabinoids into your daily regimen, is thinking about these other things that we might already be doing that work on the endocannabinoid system to really help it work the best. And, the goal of the endocannabinoid system is really to enhance balance, or the fancy term is homeostasis in the body.
right.
So a lot of this balance comes down to inflammation. So how can we optimize the endocannabinoid system to decrease the amount of unwanted or excess inflammation in the body? And so one of my favorite examples is exercise. And so if we look back on the research with exercise, there's something called the endorphin hypothesis. And I'm sure it's something you hear at least once a week in a TV show, or someone says, when they're in the gym, is like, oh my gosh, I feel so amazing after that workout because of this rush of
The
endorphins.
runner's high. Yeah, exactly.
The runner's high. So you might be wondering where the runner's high term comes from. So actually, if you look at the cascade, the biochemical cascade of endorphins, you see that, yes, endorphins, if you look at the whole cascade, so we're talking about multiple chain reactions, biochemical interactions happening in the body. Yes, endorphins are a part of it, but if you actually look at the size of the endorphin molecule, it's very large. And so if you think about how endorphins can physically cross the blood-brain barrier, it's not possible because endorphins are massive molecules. So, for something to cross into the blood-brain barrier, it has to go through these small little, let's say, channels.
Right.
And so these small little channels, the endorphin molecule is, this large. I don't know if you can see my hands, but this large. So there's no way that it's actually going to fit inside this little channel to get inside the brain. And so, it's called the runner's high actually because they found within the endorphin, hypothesis and the endorphin cascade that actually endocannabinoids play a huge role in it. And so you might not have heard the term endocannabinoid out of the context of the endocannabinoid system because we actually create our own cannabinoids in our body. So this means we're not creating CBD, we're not creating THC. Those are called phytocannabinoids, phyto meaning from a plant. So those are separate. However, we do create endocannabinoids. The two that we know the most about are anandamide and 2-AG. And so these two endocannabinoids are created on demand at different times in the body to work with the endocannabinoid system. So in particular, when we're exercising, there's actually a huge release of the endocannabinoid called anandamide. Anandamide binds to the same receptor as the one that binds to THC. And that's the CB1 receptor.
And we know what that does. If you take THC,
exactly.
that makes you feel
and that's
good.
When you feel those, subjective feelings of euphoria or feeling high. So we call it the runner's high because we have this rush of anandamide, and the anandamide molecule is smaller than an endorphin molecule. So it's actually able to cross into the blood-brain barrier and enter the brain. And so we have this rush and feeling of wow, of accomplishment, amazement, awe, right? This feeling after we work out. And it's actually due to, it's due to many things, but one of the things that it's due to is the rush of an increased concentration of anandamide in the body, and it's binding to the CB1 receptor. And so this is what I like to call a cannabimimetic because it's something that is working in the body, something that we already do. If you're taking a walk around the block and you're getting your heart rate up, you're incorporating some sort of movement or exercise into your life, and therefore that is going to play a role in the long term decreasing unwanted or excess inflammation in the body through modulating the endocannabinoid system. And that's one of my favorite examples because it's something that whether or not you do crazy HIIT workouts workouts or hot yoga, or even just take a walk around the block, like you're already optimizing your system without even knowing it. So that's just one example, but there's so many other ones too, from a food or spices or even supplement perspective that we can talk about. And I'm happy to delve into it if we have time.
Well, I think we've run out of time, and
Okay.
I feel bad as a runner that we're just starting to get high on this topic here, and I probably should have jumped into this much earlier and much sooner, but you have opened the door to so many conversations. Let me see if I can summarize some of them that struck me along the way. First of
Okay.
all, you're an integrative pharmacist. You're not just talking about pills. You're talking about maybe integrating some of your own experience or culture background in Ayurveda, Indian approach to medicine, maybe even traditional Chinese herbal practice or energy practices and other sorts of things. Homeopathy. You're willing to look at lots of different things and integrate these into a holistic approach that goes
Yes.
beyond a pill. That's not something I expect a pharmacist to say. The second thing is we talked a great deal about, and I don't know how we're going to cure it today, the built-in problems in the Western system where I don't take advantage of the pharmacist at all, even if they were not integrative, if just to take advantage of the knowledge and expertise they have in these pills and the interactions that are possible. Nobody's talking to them. They're not talking. They ask me, but I don't really talk to them, and they don't have the time to talk to me. And it's just kind of it's a transactional relationship that undercuts the whole purpose for having a pharmacist there. It might as well be a big machine just spitting these things out. And so that's part of a problem. And then the whole, how much of this is really studied or known? My assumption was very little of these herbs and supplements are really studied in great depth. You're saying there's a lot more studies than you think they are, but they might be in
Yeah.
other languages. And I go, oh yeah, well then it doesn't even exist if it's in Hindi or if it's in Tamali or Tamal or whatever other languages in India or something here. All of this starts to make me think we got some bigger problems here. And then you're really focused on the endocannabanoid system. You're a big believer in it. You're exploring it. You're creating products for it. And all of that's fascinating. And yet we're still not even teaching it to doctors and pharmacists. So how would they ever know how it works or understands? And then you give me this mind-blowing example. I thought it was all about what do we say? What's the thing that gets you high?
Endorphins.
Endorphins. I thought it's all endorphins. That's the only thing at play here. And you're saying, well, that one's a pretty big one. It can't make it through to the brain through that little barrier we know about, blood-brain barrier. It's hard to get stuff into your brain for good reason. And if you're really feeling high and having a brain reaction, it's probably something else. And you say it's something, it is part of this mysterious, somewhat unknown endocannabinoid system. It is a cannabinoid compound that we're producing in ourselves. It's not the other term for it, whatever it was, phyto or something.
I know, yeah, from the plant. Mm-hmm.
Produced from a plant. Wow. Where do we start? Each of these is an hour conversation. Are we talking about the problems? Are we talking about the benefits of integrative medicine in general and looking at other practices? Are we talking about the problems in modern medicine and why pharmacists don't really interact with their patients anymore here? Are we talking about lack of training in medicine and pharmacy schools, about other schools and about other systems and stuff here? Or are we just talking about we don't even know what this endocannabinoid system is or how it works or how it interacts? Again, we're out in the Wild West here, and I'm back to that thing I started with. I'm making this up as I go along. Does this feel right? What feels right to me? So often I'm judging, does that feel right? I'm like, feel? What does feel have to do with any of this stuff here? This is supposed to be science. Science isn't based on how you feel. Does that feel like it? And so much of what we're doing, whether it's evaluating, I'll get political again, whether it's masks or other sorts of things in COVID, or whether it's whether I should exercise or whether I should take this pill, so much of it comes down to how do I, the individual, feel? And I don't know if that's really the best way to make decisions about things in life, but that seems to be the way. That's why I buy stuff. That's why I try stuff. That's why I do stuff. That's why I believe stuff. It all starts with this mysterious, how do I feel about this? How do
I
you
think it has to be a feeling mixed with what type of, research is out there to support that. So
Yeah.
to me, a feeling is inevitably going to be a part of the, consumer patient experience, but we also have to pair that with, what is really founded in, scientific efficacy, and go from there. I really think it has to be a balanced approach of the two, but I wouldn't discount feelings fully. No.
But do we ever even believe facts anymore? You've got facts, and then somebody else has, as they famously said, alternative facts. We seem to live in a world where facts are fungible. There's a legal term I learned in law school. I can exchange them. One's as good as another. One study, and then if I tweak this study a different way, I can get a totally different result. And so we, as consumers, I think, are less and less believing in science and more believing in our own experience and our own inner voice and our own inner feelings. That seems to be what we're falling back to, because I don't care whether it's Dr. Fauci anymore. So many people, this nice old guy that I thought was a great guy, and suddenly everybody's vilifying him for what he said about COVID, down to studies about are egg whites good or egg yolks bad? Is drinking wine good for you? No, maybe not. Back and forth, I see endless studies, and they all seem to contradict each other. I hear politicians spewing different facts out as fast as I can.
I think
don't
it's
know which
really
one to
about,
believe.
we can't be making big over generalizations from one study. So I think that like a study will come out, people will freak out and say, oh my gosh, all wine is bad. And then
Right.
another study will come out, and then it will go into a media frenzy of, oh my gosh, all wine is good.
Right.
And so, I mean, we can't live in a world of absolutes. And I think that we have to look at the quantity of research that's out there. And again, like how clinically relevant or clinically rigorous it really is. So I do think that it really is, it's a lot of different factors, but we have to think about like what is real fact and what is something that's just, kind of a hyperbolized version of a fact.
And again, I don't want to get too political, but you look at things like climate change. I'm a believer. I look around, I see the climate changing. It's hotter than it's ever been in the last few years. I see things dramatically changing. Storms. We had a hurricane almost come through Southern California. That hasn't happened in 100 years. It's pretty clear to me, whether it's man-made or otherwise, natural cycle, the climate is changing. But for many of my friends and many people I know, reasonable, smart, otherwise intelligent people, the minute I say the climate's changing, they say, no, it's not. That's a hoax. That's hooey. And I say, but look, there's science. 99% of sciences, they're tracking this every day. You can feel it. Your own experience tells you this. Don't believe it. So there's a knee-jerk reaction against what you're preaching, which is science, studies, let's look at this, partly because it's confusing, partly because it's contradictory, partly because it's in other languages, or I don't know it or understand it, and I just want a quick soundbite and an answer. But I think there's an underlying anti-science fear coming back. I get into arguments with my sister-in-law about vaccines. Oh, vaccines are terrible. Don't ever... Parents won't send their kids to school to get them vaccinated anymore here. When did that happen? We all thought vaccines were the cure. It did. You got rid of 1,000 diseases, polio and other things. I was part of that initial as a kid when they took the first polio. So are we struggling against, is that the bigger issue here? We just don't trust science anymore? Some of us?
I think it's down to the way that people are perceiving what's going on in the world. And if they're perceiving it in a way that is a bit more, not believing in science, then everyone's entitled to their opinion.
Right. Or technology. We're afraid of robots. We're afraid of self-driving cars. We're afraid of battery things. There seems to be as all of this has been pushed at us, there seems to be a certain segment of the population that's pulling back and resistant to any of this. Well, I'm not resistant. I think you had me at hello on all these conversations here. I think there's a lot of value in there. I hope we just touched on it, and I invite you to come back sometime and unpack any one of those, whether it's integrative medicine or pharmacist's role and how that's been needs to get fixed again, or how the endocannabanoid system is and why isn't that being taught, to all these other things that our body's mimicking in this system. There's a lot there that you just randomly hit upon it because I'm jumping all over the place here, I guess. So I
really appreciate your time and for having me. And yeah, I look forward to coming back. It sounds great.
How do people reach you, or how do people find your product if they want to learn more about the product, the specific product that you're making?
Definitely. So the company is Element Apothic. We have products and education. And then the CRO, or the contract research organization that I mentioned, is Citrus Labs. And I can send you the link so you can put them in the caption below. Yes.
Yeah, please do, because I think people would be very interested in learning more about what you're offering. You really covered a lot today here, and I appreciate you for taking the time. We went a little over here today. Thank you for joining us, and say your name again so I don't butcher it. It's
Dr. Swathi Varanasi.
It sounds simple. Why can't I say that? Dr. Swathi Varanasi. Okay, did I get it? All right.
Swathi Varanasi, yes.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you very much. Integrative medicine, Indian Ayurvedic, Ayurveda, talking about the power of the endocannabanoid system and its misunderstood role still to this day, and the products that can mimic those kinds of reactions within your body, other than THC or other things that we associate with marijuana or cannabis or whatever here. Lots there to dissect. Thanks for coming on, and look forward to talking again here sometime.
Bye-bye.
Well, there you have it. A fascinating... We covered 1,000 subjects in that one here, conversation. So it wasn't just one conversation, it was many conversations. And that's how we do it. We're trying to open your mind to look at it from another angle here. Don't immediately have a knee-jerk reaction to anything anymore here. Look at the science, look at it in a bigger picture, and maybe we'll find a way to a healthier path together here. Right here in Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio, streaming live from our studios here at the University of California, Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.